It's been a week of frustrated peace talks, debate about jury trials, and more budget fallout. But we've got 3 underreported stories for you with repercussions for us all. What's going on with President Trump's drugs policy, the increasing threat of water wars, and is the rom-com dead? I'm Olly Mann, and this is The Week Unwrapped. And remember, you can read all you need to know about everything that matters in The Week magazine. But joining me to unwrap the week, we've got from The Week's digital team, Harriet Marsden and Jamie Timson, and senior editor of The Week Junior, Felicity Capon, all present and correct. And it's Spotify Wrapped season this week. Do any of you partake? And if so, do you therefore know what your listening age is?
Yes, I partake. And
yes.
I believe my listening age is 70.
Oof. What have you been listening to? Bit of classic rock, something at the older end of the spectrum?
I think, sadly, it's been hijacked by the fact that I have a 13-month-old and I need to listen to sleepy classical music, which involves a lot of piano stuff.
Yes. My listening age, according to Spotify, is 20, and I suspect that's because I share an account with a 9-year-old, so it's averaged it out.
Or because you're listening to a lot of Sabrina Carpenter.
Of course, I'm listening to a lot of Sabrina Carpenter, isn't everybody? Felicity, do you partake in Spotify Wrapped?
I do not. I've moved from Spotify to Tidal. And Tidal does not partake in all this nonsense.
Is it any better?
It's so much better. The sound quality is so much better. And it's just more ethical and better.
But they don't give you a data-driven AI gimmick at the end of the year.
They don't tell me that my listening age is like 93, which I'm
That's
quite
the
happy
brutal
about.
truth. Yeah. Okay, Harriet, you're up first. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Our man in Honduras.
It was asked by Honduras, many of the people of Honduras, they said it was a Biden setup. I don't mean Biden. Look, Biden didn't know he was alive, but it was the people that surround the Resolute desk, surround Biden when he was there, which was about very little time. And the people of Honduras really thought he was set up and it was a terrible thing. He was the president of the country. And they basically said he was a drug dealer because he was the president of the country. And they said it was a Biden administration setup. And I looked at the facts and I agreed with them.
The sound of a whirring air vent with a pensioner ranting over the top. It can only be President Trump on board Air Force One, the only time he speaks to cameras. Why? I don't know. Harriet, what's the story? Who has he pardoned?
He's pardoned Juan Orlando Hernandez, who is, we're just going to call him JOH because that is what he's known as and it's going to be easier.
It's going to be easier for the rest of us. Thank you. Yeah, very well pronounced though.
Thank you. This is the former president of Honduras, who in 2024 was sentenced to 45 years in US prison for drug trafficking and weapons charges. And that's the sound of Trump pardoning him. And he has now been released from federal US jail on Monday. So this guy, the prosecution basically alleged that he had, in his time as president of Honduras, created this cocaine superhighway of Colombian cocaine through Honduras to the US. So he was convicted with a substantial amount of evidence against him and overwhelming evidence for 4 to 45 years. And that was only a year ago.
Yeah. And this story isn't just about JOH, is it? It's also about his successor, because they've been having an election in Honduras this week, which Trump has also waded in on.
Yes, Trump has big time weighed in on the Honduran elections, which were last Sunday. So JOH's ally and the candidate of his right-wing party is Nasri Tito Astfura. And Trump has backed this guy and threatened to withdraw millions of US dollars in aid and support for Honduras if he loses. So at the moment, that election is kind of locked in a technical tie, which means that they need to do a manual recount because it looks like the Trump-backed candidate is sort of almost exactly neck and neck with the candidate of the centrist Liberal Party. So we're not really sure what the outcome of that election is at the moment, but what's clear is that Trump enormously intervened and threatened and browbeated and tried to back the effectively the successor to the ex-president that he's just pardoned.
Which I think is fair to say is not traditionally the role of the President of the United States of America. So, Jamie, what is going on behind the scenes?
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of simple suggestion that obviously he just wants a kind of right-wing ally, and by pardoning Hernandez and endorsing Asfura, he's trying to lock in a kind of friendly government in Honduras, so kind of less about justice, as he claims, and kind of more about geopolitics. The Trump administration has escalated a war on drugs in the Caribbean. They've launched strikes on alleged what they see as narcotics trafficking boats. He's threatened Venezuela many times, and he kind of sees keeping someone on side in Central America and Latin America as important for his ongoing war on drugs, as he describes it. Of course, like, there's a massive hypocritical stance here of talking about how much you're wanting to take on narcotics trafficking while also pardoning a former head of state who courts in the US found responsible for trafficking hundreds of tons of cocaine. It does kind of undermine the kind of moral high ground that maybe some in the Trump administration are pushing.
Yes. I mean, Felicity, why is there no consistency in Trump's drugs policy? He's putting tariffs on Canada and Mexico for fentanyl, and then he is pardoning someone who's convicted of being a drugs baron.
Yeah, I mean, don't ask me to understand or explain the inner workings of the President of America. I mean, everything I've read seems to be that everyone's extremely surprised he pardoned JOH, and that it was very, very inconsistent and doesn't really make any sense if he's claiming to go after the narco lords. I mean, he is the biggest one. Like, he's kind of right up there with your Netflix drugs barons, like he's the worst of the worst type thing. But obviously, I think it seems as though Hernandez has kind of he's played his hand very well with Trump in that he's really appealed to Trump's ego. He's really
tell us about that. He wrote a letter, didn't he?
Yeah, he wrote a letter, a 4-page letter, casting himself as a victim of political persecution by the Biden-Harris administration, which is obviously going to get Trump's ears pricked up, isn't it? And he's compared what he's been going through to that of Trump, that there's been this kind of like very unjust political witch hunt against him. I think Trump sort of sees himself a bit, in his plight, that they've both been persecuted by radical leftist forces, despite the fact that the US investigation, which put Hernandez behind bars, happened during Trump's first term. So none of it makes sense, but I don't think we would expect it to, really. And it's very worrying for the people of Honduras. Like, there are serious problems in the country. There's rampant crime. The economy is stagnating. The people of Honduras desperately need a political solution. But the idea of Hernandez being free and coming back is literally terrifying. Like, this is a very, very scary guy who's very authoritarian in how he ruled the country. And it would be interesting to see whether that's affected voters in the election, because I don't think that will play well with the people of Honduras. I think the people of Honduras on the whole were very happy that he had been locked up for such a long time. And the idea that he's now freed, I don't think that will play very well out in this election. But I mean, overall, it is just outrageous, really, that Trump is meddling once again in a Latin American country. He's already done it with Brazil, sticking up for Bolsonaro and that whole saga. He's done it in Argentina. He threatened to withdraw funding unless Milei got into power. And obviously the US has a history of getting involved in South America for in the last however many decades. And it's a shame that he has not learnt the lesson to not get involved.
Okay, and we know, Harriet, that Trump gets involved in things if there's something in it for him, whether that's something that consolidates his power or something that gives him a backhander or something that improves the status of America. We're speculating, obviously, but what is in it for him apart from having this kind of ally with an authoritarian leader?
I think you've got to kind of zoom out a little bit, because under the second Trump administration, the one of the defining features has been this kind of seemingly very inconsistent but actually very intense meddling in Latin America, because the feeling in the Trump administration is that the focus had been on China, the focus had been on the Middle East, the focus had been elsewhere. Meanwhile, foreign policy in the US is actually very much more directly impacted by whatever happens, particularly in Central America, because the vast majority of illegal immigration to the US comes through Central America via the Darien Gap from Colombia through Panama all the way up through Mexico. And also because of the security issues, they kind of took their eye off the ball with Latin America and allowed China to sort of move in and massively influence a lot of countries and build a lot and invest a lot all over Latin America. So there's kind of an overcorrection going on. There's also a bit of the chessboard situation that we've mentioned. that in El Salvador, his sort of pal, the dictator Nayib Bukele. In Argentina, there's Javier Milei, another very staunch ally. There are these countries where he's creating this network of allied, like-minded individuals against what he sees as the enemy, which is Cuba, Nicaragua, and in particular Venezuela. So those are countries that Honduras, the outgoing president, has been very much allied with. So there is all sorts of political and domestic and foreign policy issues, but there's also just Trump's personality of being extremely suggestible. Not only was there this very sucky-uppy letter calling Trump Your Excellency and saying that JOH had found strength from his resilience as a similarly convicted felon, but also a very long-time ally and friend of Trump, Roger Stone, has been lobbying loads about JOH and showed Trump the letter on Friday, just hours before Trump pardoned him. There isn't one coherent strategy. It's partly personal, partly political, and just partly his own suggestibility.
I mean, regardless of what actually happens next, Jamie, in Honduras, why does Honduras matter to the rest of us? We talked a bit about why it might matter to Trump. But, I mean, is it going to have an impact on most people listening to this?
I mean, I think it's the macro thing that Harriet talks about, I think is the real reason. And the worry that it kind of emboldens Trump should he kind of get his way in this situation. If his backed leader wins, it kind of shows that he's on the right path in terms of intervening and intervention in those areas. While obviously we don't have the same issues with Latin America that maybe some in the southern states of the US do in terms of immigration or the kind of where the focus lies, there is a kind of wider view that like actually Trump is aware of the kind of dwindling years of his administration. We obviously don't know what his plans are for a third term, but it still remains illegal for him to do that for now. But there is a worry that the closer that he gets to the end of his second administration and the more emboldened he is by things like this, the more that he does things that are really ground-shakingly kind of worrying and scary. And part of that is intervening in things that they really should not be intervening in. You know, in the old days in Latin America, they would use the CIA or someone to intervene in these countries in order to get the political change that he needed. But now he's just using the military. He's just saying, actually, we can strike whenever, wherever on land that isn't ours in order to get our own way. And I mean, what does that say for the next decade afterwards, whoever comes after Trump, if that is proven to be a success? I
suppose, though, Felicity, you know, the evidence is on a knife edge. It is really close. Just because Trump doesn't have evidence, that doesn't actually mean that the election hasn't been tampered with. I mean, he may be right. He might not be right about which side deserves to win. But there might be a case for looking more carefully at how the process has happened.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, certainly the counting of votes in Honduras, the process is very, very slow. And that's partly because it's a very mountainous country. There's a lot of rural areas where literally the votes have to be carried by donkey to get to somewhere. So far, it's probably like the urban votes that we've seen and not so much of the rural votes. I mean, the thing about Trump is he can be very mercurial and he can be all over the place, but sometimes there can be like truth at the heart of what he's saying. And like Honduras, along with Guatemala and El Salvador, is called the Northern Triangle. Like they are a trio of countries notorious for high volumes of drugs, human and arms trafficking. So, I mean, I think from what I've read, I think actually Mexico and Colombia are the bigger routes and origins of drugs coming into the United States. But if I'm trying to put Trump in a better light, like he has vowed to crack down on drugs coming into the States, and the Northern Triangle is partly responsible for that. So I can see why he would want to kind of sway the vote and have allies in those countries who will cooperate with him on security matters. And I think that would like play well with his base at home. But it's the whole thing with Hernandez just shows how completely like incoherent and inconsistent the policy is overall. Not to mention, like, the massive build-up of the US Navy around Venezuela is absolutely mad. And it's, like, a really good under-the-radar story because, like, the idea of America literally going to war with Venezuela and some of the stuff they've been doing, the whole double-tap strike, these kind of basically, like, murders in open waters of Venezuelans who apparently are carrying drugs but are also citizens. This goes against, like, the rules of warfare, it's a pretty big deal. And like Jamie was saying, it does show that Trump is being quite erratic at the moment.
Yeah, and just for clarity, what is a double tap strike for those of us that missed that?
A double tap strike is when you go back to kind of finish off. So you strike, and then if not everyone has been killed, you go back to make sure that everyone has been killed.
Yeah, it's widely considered to be a war crime.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, by the way, there is no evidence that any of these boat strikes that have been happening in the Caribbean since the start of September, there's no evidence presented that any of those boats were carrying drugs. Like, nearly 80 people, I think now at this point, have been killed in these extrajudicial strikes in open waters. What's being massively debated in the US today, actually, or at the time of recording, the big drama in the US is over this so-called double strike, where the evidence is that one of the US strikes on a boat didn't kill everybody, and there was a second strike to, in the words of the defense secretary, to eliminate the survivors. And this has added to an increase in pressure over this military buildup near Venezuela, and the fact that Trump announced the airspace closed over the weekend, and he said that land strikes are imminent against Venezuela, and he has admitted that this is about trying to support regime change to try and oust the dictator Nicolas Maduro. The drama is increasing around this military buildup in the Caribbean at the same time as the strikes and threats against Venezuela are also increasing.
Okay, Harriet, Your Excellency, very well summarised. Thank you. On the way, why we could soon be drowning in water wars. That's after this. Okay, Jamie, your turn. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Water everywhere, but not a drop to drink.
The lack of rain is very serious. That's why I've come here to ask God to send us his mercy.
Never in its history has the capital recorded such an extreme drought. Residents of Tehran have agreed to let us film their daily lives if they remain anonymous. This woman shows us how ordinary tasks have become impossible.
France 24 reporting from Iran on Tuesday. Jamie, what's the story?
So Iran is now facing one of its worst water crises in decades. Reservoirs feeding Tehran, the capital, so big dams, are kind of perilously low. Groundwater supplies have been heavily overexploited. This year in Iran has been one among the driest on record, so rainfall has plummeted, and in lots of regions precipitation is far below historical norms. The drought is, it's kind of seen as like the seventh year now, as parts of Iran have endured multiple years of low rainfall. What's interesting is that, initially when you first think about this story, you think that it's potentially a story about climate change, and while that maybe makes up 10 to 15% of the current water crisis, the experts believe that more than 80% of the damage is rooted in human decisions and is about the way that their water management policies, effectively after the revolution in the 70s, they focused massively on agriculture in order to try and boost the economy. But what they did there was really kind of pumping the ground in order to irrigate. It's kind of called groundwater over extraction. So it's basically just taking as much water as you can out of the ground in order to feed and to grow as a population, as a country. A kind of over-reliance on dams then, and this kind of over-extraction has meant that the ground is literally sinking in some areas of Iran. And now what we're seeing in Tehran is, as the clip showed, is that they may be approaching a day zero where taps go dry, water rationing is being considered, and effectively normal life for the millions of people that live there is under threat.
So what's it currently like? For people listening rather than watching, in that clip we saw a woman try and fill a basin to do some dishwashing, and no water came out the tap now.
Yeah, so they basically are at a stage where they're like having to really change what their kind of day-to-day aspects are looking like of what they're doing. It looks like they're talking about only washing and using waters on certain days, which is the kind of rationing thing that they were saying. But there's been no actual kind of top-down level of like, right, okay, now we need to do this. Effectively, there's an element of accepting responsibility that I think people are worried about within Iran. But I guess the reason that I'm bringing it is it's not just specifically about Iran. It kind of suggests that there are going to be more issues like this as we kind of move forward. And unfortunately, conflict with regards to water is increasing. Last year, 2024, according to a new report by the Pacific Institute, there were 420 water-related violent incidents worldwide. Most of those are in the Middle East, South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, but that's a record and a kind of massive jump from 2023 when there were 355. So obviously, water is, I mean, it's long been said that fight for water and resources will be the next kind of global war, but it seems to be coming faster than we imagined.
Yeah, it's interesting, that map, actually, Harriet, showing all these different, water incidents. I mean, we mentioned the words water wars earlier, but actually some of them aren't as you imagine them to be wars. I mean, I saw one of the incidents on the map was in Scotland, and there hasn't been a war there as far as I know, but obviously there's been an incident. So an example of an incident might be, for example, in Gaza, where we saw Palestinians trying to get water and then getting killed. Not because they were getting water, but because the Israelis said you shouldn't be standing there, basically. So water as a driving force is something that is motivating a lot of danger.
Yes, exactly. So most of the places where there was conflict over water, the lack of water was the trigger of violence. Like in Algeria, for example, people rioted when the taps went dry. But the other thing that's on the rise is water being the target of war. So like, for example, Israel, like you said, targeting wells in Gaza, Israeli settlers destroying pipelines in the West Bank, Russia targeting dams in Ukraine, Russian allied activist groups targeting water systems in the US. So water becoming a target as well, because the thing about water is that people can survive for significantly longer without food than they can without water. And also when you target the water supply, you don't necessarily need to run out of water for water to be undrinkable. A lack of access to clean water is a really big problem as well. Like when the water sources become contaminated, then the whole population is at risk of disease. And it's creating like an unbelievable amount of conflict. Like people talk about a water war brewing between the US and Mexico because of this treaty between the two that means that Mexico has to send water from the Rio Grande up north, and Mexico's kind of fallen behind, so that's causing problems on the border with Texas. There's tensions between Iran and Afghanistan because some Iranian leaders have said that Afghanistan isn't letting enough water in through the Helmand River. Big tension between Brazil and Paraguay over this big hydroelectric dam. So it's becoming like not just a source of conflict, but also a legitimate war target as well.
And Felicity, the Iranians are trying to fix this issue with cloud seeding. What is that, and can it work?
It's one of the things they're attempting. It's quite controversial. It's a technology that's been around since the 50s, and it has been used in some countries. China, the US, the UAE have all used it to help address water shortages. It involves injecting chemical salts, including silver or potassium iodide, into clouds via aircraft, so kind of spraying them, or through generators on the ground. And the chemicals mean that the water vapor can condense more easily and turn into rain. Which sounds great in theory, but the problem is that you need clouds. So if the skies above Iran are clear, they obviously can't do it, which is a big problem. And the other thing is that we don't really know what effect the chemicals have on the ground. So we could just be creating rain that leads to another ecological disaster further down the line if all the soil is then becoming contaminated. And talking about conflict, it's already been seen as something that could lead to further conflicts with countries trying to steal other countries' clouds, which sounds wild, but is something that is like a big concern. But I think from what I can see, like people are very, very keen on this technology.
They can't have any of our clouds, just to be clear.
They can't travel that far. Our clouds.
They could have half of our clouds. I'd be happy with those clouds.
They must stay in Britain. But it's also been used in other. It's been used to increase snow on ski slopes, for example. So it does work. I think countries like Iran that are, in a really bad way will want to use it, but it's not without its risks, and it is quite controversial.
I mean, I suppose what's quite interesting about it, Jamie, is as we've been discussing, this affects people who are in conflict anyway and who are poor anyway. But actually, this is the thing that affects everybody, isn't it? Every human being needs to drink water, or at least liquids derived from water. So, the people living in Tehran with a Playboy lifestyle are also affected by a drought.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of, we were talking about ways in which to solve it, and that will be the kind of driving aspect of, the question about whether you safeguard civilian water systems in accordance with international law, which is one of the things, to basically just say you cannot attack water, where water becomes a weapon of war. You can't do that. And also like trying, innovation or that kind of stuff, because I think the implications are massive. One of the suggestions from the analysts in Iran is that you evacuate places like Tehran and move the population to places where there are more natural water, so towards the coast and other areas in Iran that do have the space. But like somewhere like Tehran, it's a mega city. How do you evacuate somewhere like that? And most families can't afford to relocate, and any kind of like forced displacement basically triggers massive economic disruption and social unrest. The questions about immigration and refugees and climate refugees, that all comes to play, because if people are moving towards where the water sources are, there's going to be an issue about scarcity of resources, and it is going to affect everyone if we are, if we're worried about, what the situation is going to be in 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time. I think it's, just because we have quite a lot of water at the moment and rain, particularly in Scotland, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's always going to be the case, one, but also two, that will become like a hot commodity that people will want to access. And that's, that's only, I would say only 20, 30 years away.
Just on the issue of the UK, we've already had like terrible water shortages. Like in August this year, the government announced a nationally significant water shortage. By 2055, England's public water supply could be short by 5 billion litres a day. This comes at huge cost to the economy. In 2022, London nearly ran out of water, and like there are loads of problems that need to be addressed in this country. I think we've got really complacent as, I think, the rainiest nation in Europe. I think we've got very complacent that there's always going to be water. But due to a number of factors, including obviously climate change, but also very leaky pipes, extremely old infrastructure. The infrastructure in London is the same as it was when it was first put in Victorian times. Privatisation, you could argue that water companies are paying out these massive dividends. Like there's been no funding into the infrastructure at all. There's much more pressure now on our water systems. Like it's, if you think Iran is all the way over there and it's not going to happen, it's not coming for us, like that's just really, really misguided. It's going to be a massive problem in this country too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that the issue here is conflating rain with water. Because even if it rains, even if cloud seeding works, which it doesn't really very much, but even if it does, rain does not equal water source. There's plenty of rain in places that are running out of water supply, because it's not the same as having a supply of clean water to people's taps, to people's plumbing. It's not the same thing. I mean, Kabul, for example, it's not necessarily the problem that there isn't water. The problem is that most of the city's groundwater is contaminated. So Kabul could be one of the first major capitals in the world to run out of water. It could run out of water really, really soon. The same issue in Mexico City. It's not that there isn't enough water, it's that there isn't enough supply of water. And we are effectively draining the planet dry with our agricultural exploitation, with mega infrastructure projects, with like data centers, for example, a mismanagement of water systems, like Felicity said. A lot of them are very old. They're really not built for modern urbanization, population explosions in cities. These water supplies aren't built for that to happen. And obviously climate change is exacerbating the entire thing. So this is a problem that's going to affect literally every single person in the world.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned social unrest as a potential consequence of this, Jamie. If you were the Iranian government, I realise that's probably a stretch for you, but if you were, we've talked on this show quite a bit about things that are nearly pushing the people of Iran into political action, the revolt over women's clothes and women driving and all of this. You'd look around, wouldn't you, if you're an Iranian and say, They don't seem to be having these issues so acutely in the UAE or Saudi Arabia or Israel, and those places are hot too. So there is something wrong with our infrastructure, and why isn't our government doing more?
Yes, yeah. I mean, luckily for you, I do spend every night imagining myself as the Iranian government, so I have thought about this one. The stuff that I've read is talking about the recycling and large-scale water reuse and recycling. Singapore, for example, now supplies 40% of its national water through advanced recycling, and it's aiming for 55%. Iran, in contrast, is barely any at all. Municipal wastewater remains almost entirely unused for industrial or groundwater purposes. So there's a massive amount of recycling that they can do. The regime kind of frequently tells citizens to purchase household tanks and water pumps rather than implementing like top-down solutions. And what that means is that families simply lose water at night, but the officials can say, well, there's no problem. Like, we haven't had to ration. Actually, I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier of acceptance of a problem. And in Iran, quite a lot of the time, it's about how they appear to the outside world rather than how they appear to the people in their country. But yeah, I mean, this could be the thing that really does, explode the kind of powder keg, because when people are dying because they haven't got enough water, it doesn't just become one of those things that you can kick down the road.
All right. Up next, when it comes to the big screen, is romance dead? That's after this. Felicity, you're finishing the show. What do you think this week should be remembered for?
Rom-coms aren't as good as they used to be. And that is the opinion of Mr. Thomas Brody Sangster, who played Sam in Love Actually. And if you want to feel really, really old, Love Actually came out in 2003. He was 13. He is now 35.
But still has the same face, like Macaulay Culkin.
Age today.
So weird.
But yeah, he's given an interview with The Telegraph and has basically said that the rise of streaming is to blame for cheaper productions and rushed scripts, but also that the best rom-coms that were kind of from the 90s, and it was like a simpler time, maybe a more romantic time. It was the pre-smartphone era. And so, yeah, it just got me thinking, are rom-coms all terrible, and have they finally died a terrible death?
Fine. I mean, you've posed the questions, Felicity, but we're going to need some answers. I mean, is the rom-com dead? I don't think the rom-com's dead. It's just like he's indicating, it's shifted platform, hasn't it? If you like rom-coms, you can watch a sort of 20-part series that's effectively a rom-com.
But they're not very good. I was trying to think of the best rom-coms, and like me and my husband were brainstorming the ones we really liked, and it was depressing how old they are now. Like, I was thinking Crazy Stupid Love with
yeah, that's a great film.
Emma Stone, Ryan Gosling, Steve Carell, and then and my husband said that's like 13 years old now. And I was struck, and I don't think it's just because I've grown up, but I honestly can't think of a very good one that I've seen recently. We decided, in the name of research for this podcast, we decided to watch Anyone But You last night, which is the Glenn Powell, Sydney Sweeney rom-com of 2023, I want to say, and that initially made $6 million in its opening weekend, but went on in the next 7 weeks to take $170 million. It was dreadful. I wanted to like it. It's not funny.
Well, Rye Lane came out last year, and I thought that was delightful. 2023, the one that was set in Peckham. I thought that was absolutely charming, that one.
No, you see that I only know about that from a dimly remembered poster campaign on the Tube. So that I guess tells you, doesn't it, that these things don't have the viral word of mouth hit that they used to, even if it is good.
I mean, I'm voting for Silver Linings Playbook as my best rom-com of the last 20 years. I think that came out in
2012.
2012.
Jamie's champing at the bit to come in and talk about rom-coms. Jamie, go on. You're the walking IMDb on this, clearly.
Yeah.
Give us your view.
Ballad of Wallace Island came out this year, and it's a rom-com, and I would recommend everyone go and see it. It's got 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's one of the sweetest, most lovely. It's Tim Key, Tom Basden, and Kerry Mulligan, and it's just a really top level rom-com. I'd really recommend. I think the thing about it is that I think probably you've hit the nail on the head, Ollie, about TV series are more applicable now. Like, nobody wants this, for example, on Netflix, which I thought the first series was very good, but the second series wasn't very good at all.
But there you are. I mean, you are effectively saying, by 13 hours in, I'd seen enough.
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot of it.
And I think that maybe there's some argument about like how much money people are willing to put into rom-coms at the moment, and how much they are willing to put into like blockbusters that are going to appeal to everyone, because potentially, sadly, or even though I'm a massive fan, they maybe don't have as wide an audience as, say, the latest Marvel thing, I don't know what the latest Marvel thing is, but one of the things.
I wonder, Felicity, whether superhero franchises, because that is basically what's taken over, cinemas, are more tolerant of rehashing the same story a million different times with a slightly different figure at the middle. Whereas with rom-coms, it was always the same story. Boy meets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back again. But actually it began to feel like it was eating itself. People wanted something more original. And you see that even in Love Actually, don't you? I mean, in that clip we played, the joke about that is it's a hackneyed idea that Bill Nye is singing Love Is All Around, which is Richard Curtis lampooning his own film from only about 8 years earlier. So it's kind of like saying, look, we've done every cliche. We've done all the meet cutes. We've seen Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan get it on. Like, how many things can you do?
But I think that if you like the rom-com, you're always going to like the rom-com. It's just got to be done well. Like, it can be a very simple, sweet message, but and if it's a good movie, I think people are always going to show up for it. And I mean, you only have to look at like the enduring appeal of Bridget Jones, that, the fourth one came out last year, I believe. That's grossed $600 million in today's money, and the film franchise has brought in $1.3 billion. So that is, I mean, she was like a 90s icon, really, wasn't she? And the 4 movies have done really, really well. She's now had a statue unveiled. So it goes to show that if you can hit on a really good rom-com, a really good story, people will turn up for it. But the other thing I would say, which I kind of agree with you on, is that I think the rom-com isn't dead. It just evolved. You had this kind of era of like Judd Apatow's films that came in that kind of replaced the rom-com, like The 40-Year-Old Virgin, Knocked Up, Superbad.
Those are sort of rom-coms, but then someone gets cancer
like
2 hours in.
Knocked Up is a rom-com.
Yeah, I would say Knocked Up is a rom-com, but a lot of them turned their focus to like the bromance that you saw in like Superbad. Bridesmaids was the female equivalent, but it was more about like the best buddies rather than like the boy meets girl type thing. So I think you're right, maybe in that people have got tired of boy meets girl and they sailed off into the sunset, and maybe the rom-com has just evolved into something else.
I mean, we are talking 1 year on from the Gavin and Stacey finale, which was the biggest TV show of last year, which is absolute rom-com boilerplate template, isn't it? There's even running after a train in a coach at the end.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
The kind of big elephant in the room here with this interview, I think, which no one's mentioned, is that it is so ridiculously ironic considering how critically panned Love Actually was. So there's this boy in Love Actually going, oh, rom-coms aren't as good as they used to be, but actually Love Actually is critically by many actually critically sort of decimated. Like it's not considered to be a great film. It has sort of become like a cult film. People watch it every year at Christmas, blah blah blah, but it is not considered by most critics to be a good film. It certainly wasn't critically acclaimed when it came out, whereas plenty of rom-coms that have come out since have actually gone on to win like big, like Silver Linings Playbook, I think, won an Oscar. And I don't know about you guys, I think my favorite rom-com of all time is probably My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which I think is a near perfect rom-com, and I think that grossed more than Love Actually, and actually was much more critically acclaimed.
Agreement in the room for My Big Fat Greek Wedding. I've not seen it.
Great movie.
What?
I need
Great
to address that.
movie.
Can I speak up for The Tall Guy, by the way? If any of you have seen that.
No, I've not seen that.
I'd always ask. Richard Curtis's first one. Emma Thompson, Jeff Goldblum, and Rowan Atkinson.
Mr. Bean.
If you guys saw Richard Curtis's most recent About Time, which I think was also fairly well critically acclaimed, also with Bill Nye, and that only came out a few years ago.
I think it was quite a while ago again. I think we're just old. I think it was like...
Yeah, I think that probably was about 10 years ago.
I would say the only interesting thing is the technology thing, because I was watching Before Sunrise the other day, because it's one of my favourite films, Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy meeting on a train. The whole thing is based around the fact that they can't get in contact with each other because they have literally strangers who have just met and they don't have phones. And I do think that there are more, like you think about When Harry Met Sally, like all of these great films that would be completely ruined by technology and by the advent of just being able to text each other or...
When Harry face matched Sally.
Yeah.
You've Got Mail was all about an email relationship. To be
yes, it was lovely. Yeah, lovely film. But I do wonder if there's not a way to do those kind of films well about Tinder or Hinge, or I'm yet to see a rom-com film that nails that thing.
Yeah, I mean, that you'd think that would have the natural template of what's the one with John Cusack in the record store?
High Fidelity.
High Fidelity. Yeah, that's like all his exes, isn't it? That would be the Tinder movie, wouldn't it? Basically, I'm seeing 20 people in half an hour. I'd watch that.
In 2023, The Guardian did this big article touting the return of the rom-com and said that even though for a while studios had kind of gone off the mid-budget movie and kind of pushed big blockbusters with lots of action and superhero franchises with big overseas gross potential, that actually now those are sort of falling out of favor. Studios want to see profitability from direct-to-consumer streamer platforms. And, you know, rom-coms are quick and cheap to make, like no special effects. Actors like them. They don't have to be in them for a really long time. They work really well on streaming. And loads of new rom-coms have been coming out over the last couple of years, but just a lot, you know, that on streaming. And a lot more, I guess, non-traditional rom-com storylines as well, like lots more LGBTQ relationships being shown in rom-coms, a lot more kind of interracial relationships, a lot more more, I guess, sort of like less traditional, as opposed to things like Love Actually, which, you know, many people have argued since are like overwhelmingly sexist. So there is, I agree with Felicity. I think the rom-com is never going to die. It's just evolving.
Well, okay, so we sort of agree with Felicity, but we're also disproving the story that you came in with, Felicity, which is a thesis that the rom-com is dead. But, you know, what he's saying in this interview is more of them should be made in the traditional format. It's a shame that they're not. Do you agree with that?
I just feel they should be better. I think they're sort of, they have evolved, but I think a lot of them have got very lazy. Like, I do think the scripts are bad. I do think when watching Anyone But You, the characters hadn't been like fully realised. The script was terrible. Like, it just didn't make us laugh, really. There wasn't that kind of, like, the sidekick characters like Rowan Atkinson, or that just wasn't the same kind of investment. And also, I says, you know, you don't have the greats of the 90s. You don't have like Hugh Grant and Colin Firth popping up and Rowan Atkinson and all these like brilliant like comic heavyweight people coming in. I just feel like there will always be space for a good rom-com, but I think the standard and the quality has definitely fallen by the wayside.
On which note, I've got to get a plane out of here. You can all take it in turns to run after me and declare your love. My thanks to Jamie, Felicity and Harriet. Remember, you can follow this show for free and you can get every episode as soon as it's released. Just search for The Week Unwrapped wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, where you can watch us as well. And remember, you can get 6 free issues of The Week magazine if you take out a trial subscription. Just go to theweek.com/subscriptions. In the meantime, I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer, Ollie Peart at Rethink Audio. And until we meet again to unwrap next week, I love you!